Hey Ottawa, this is your Monday Market Snapshot of the Ottawa Real Estate Market. Today is Monday, June 26th, 2023, and in this week's update, I'm going to share some sneak peeks of the trends that we're seeing throughout June 2023. So make sure to stick around for those graphs and details. My name is Annalee Rice, and I'm a realtor here in Ottawa, Ontario. And every week I share the stats on what's happening with the listings, sales, and price trends, as well as other information. Our first look is citywide for the stats. Last week I had commented that it was the first week we'd seen over 1,700 active listings. And this week we have a huge jump, 5% increase of active listings, increase of 88, and bringing us to 1,801 active listings. It's our biggest jump this spring. Sales this week were down just slightly, down by 10, and we'll notice that they were down in the detached and condominiums, but up for townhomes across the city. Here's the graph form. So for this week's active listings, conditionally sold, and sales within the last week. We can see the active listings, the green, climbing quite significantly, and we see that the red wedge, the sold properties, firm sold, are pretty steady. What we see this week was actually a bit of a decrease in the number of homes that were conditionally sold. Here we see the graph form for the number of new listings versus sales. So this week we saw 469 properties listed for sale. Of those, 79% or 369 were new listings, new to the market, and 100 or 21% were properties that were being relisted. Sales this week were down slightly from last week. If we look at the trends for the last 3-4 weeks, we see that the new listings, the yellow bars, have been pretty consistently high, and the sales have been pretty consistent, but lower than what we saw in May. I do want to point out that since we are at the last full week of June, and a lot of listings do expire at the beginning of the month or the last day of the month, I do expect to see quite a drop in the number of active listings next week. And with us going into a long weekend, holiday weekend, I do expect that the number of sales will drop over the next week or so because of the people taking vacations and such. So look out for that. Of the properties that sold this week, we had 27% of them sold with no conditions. That's the red bars. And the rest did sell with conditions. So we're still fluctuating back between about a quarter and a third of the properties selling with no conditions. Of the properties that sold this week, 28% were on the market for 7 days or less, and 73% were on the market for 30 days or less. Of those properties selling within 7 days, 62% of those sold with no conditions. It's actually a 9% drop from what we saw last week at 71%. Next, we'll move into the details for the different regions of the city. In the central urban region, we see a jump in the detached homes and condos listed for sale and a drop in the townhomes. Not a huge drop, but a little bit. Sales of both detached homes and condominiums decreased this week, and we saw a slight increase in the sales of townhomes. In Canada and Stittsville, we see a slight increase in the active listings across the property types. Sales of detached homes and townhomes were up just slightly, and the sales of condos were down this week. The townhome sales volume remained slow for the second week in a row. As I recall, last week I'd mentioned that it was the first time we'd been below 20 sales all spring, and this is the second week in a row where the townhome sales have been a bit slow. In Barrhaven and Riverside South, we see a slight increase in the properties listed across property types. Sales this week were also up for all property types, but most notably townhomes. I have noticed that the number of active listings for detached homes is starting to creep up. It was a few weeks ago I was mentioning that Barrhaven had very few detached homes listed for sale, and now it's starting to get a little bit more on par. And in Orleans, we're also seeing a slight increase in active listings across property types. Sales were up slightly for detached homes and condominiums and down slightly for townhomes. Here are the detailed statistics for the detached homes across the city. We can still see that conditionally sold property in Barrhaven, Riverside South, pulling up the average sale price there. And so we'll see how many more weeks it sits conditionally sold before it hopefully moves over to the sold column. And here are the stats for townhomes. We continue to see the inventory rising across the city for townhomes, and it's resulting in slightly longer time for the townhomes to be on the market, which makes sense. And perhaps we'll start to see a slight moderation in the sale prices. It's still a pretty tight market, so time will tell whether or not the prices will be affected by higher inventory. And here are the complete numbers for condominiums across the city. Okay, so this week I'm including the months of inventory. This is a chart that I usually do once or twice per month. And as we near the end of June, I wanted to check in on how our months of inventory has been changing. As we've seen this month in June, our inventory has been slowly creeping up. Well, not quite slowly, but it's been creeping up. We're down now up to over 1,800, and our sales have stayed quite steady, but they are lower than what we saw in May. So these two things factor into how many months of inventory you have. Remember that the months of inventory is the number of months it would take at the current rate of sales to sell all of the current inventory without any more properties being listed. So this week we see a jump in all three markets. Detached homes are now up to 2.4 months, townhomes up to 1.4 months from just shy of 1 month, and condominiums are up to 1.7 months, again up from about 1.2. And the other chart that I'm going to share with a little bit of just a check-in was to show the close price to the original list price. So I wanted to check with this because with the inventory creeping up, the ratio gives us some insight as to the pricing strategies that are being used for listing homes. The average home is selling just below asking price pretty much across the board, ranging between 98.4% for condos, which has always typically been a little bit lower, to 99.5% for townhomes. So we see a slight drop. It was at 100% last month, and now it's slightly less. Remember, these are just averages. There are definitely plenty of homes that sell over asking, and there are lots of homes that are selling under asking. But on average, they are selling for slightly less than asking price, original asking price. Okay, I hope that update was interesting to you. And if you have any questions or things that you'd like to see, please get in touch. Let me know, leave a comment. Follow me on YouTube or Instagram, and I hope you have a fantastic week.